Previously, the only way to protect something is with armies and lead bullets. What crypto brought to the table was the ability to protect your valuables with your brain. So if you're a Nigerian goat farmer and you want to buy 1/10 of a SpaceX share, you can.
Welcome back to Dose of Alpha. Today's a bonus episode, and it's a little different. We're going back to the basics, answering the beginner questions this show usually skips past. If you don't recognize me, that's fair. I'm Nick. I'm usually on the other end of the camera. I edit every episode of the show, so I spend a lot of time listening to these guys, and even I have questions still. So whether you're brand new to crypto, or you've been here a while and want to sharpen your fundamentals, this one's for you. Today, I'm asking 5 questions, straight to the top. Bryan Colligan, CEO of Alpha Growth. How are you doing today, Bryan?
Doing excellent. Thanks, Nick.
Good. We're going to start broad here. Can you break down the basics for us? What exactly is crypto? What's a blockchain? And what is a protocol?
Okay, so there's a key invention that happened when we brought the blockchain. Blockchain is basically how we can coordinate trustlessly with computers all over the world. So maybe I'm dealing with somebody in India or the Philippines or in Africa, like traditionally places where it's hard to do business with if you don't have people on the ground and you don't have like local intention. What blockchain brought to the table is 2 things. Anybody in the world can do business together and we can trade something on a ledger. The main invention in this is if I send you an image on Instagram or Facebook, I take my image and I upload it to a server. I have a copy, the Facebook has a copy, and then when you receive it on your side, you now have a copy. But who owns it? In that scenario, Facebook owns it. So Web 2 is like, how do we easily get everything and the ownership rights? And it always goes to the ownership rights owns the platform. So everything you post on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Meta or TikTok, that's owned by the platform. You're giving up your rights for that ownership. What blockchain did was, how do we coordinate on computers at a global scale? And then who owns what? So if I have an image, it is connected to my wallet. It is mine. I own it. And if I send it to you, you view it, but you don't own it. So now we have like titles, digital currency, RWAs, images, anything that is like digitally native, and like that's what's kind of the whole idea around the NFT space. Blockchain solved that. How do you send things trustlessly, and how do you define who owns what at its most basic principle?
Okay, cool. Could you go into more detail on what a protocol is?
Protocols are a way, basically a communication layer on how computers communicate with each other. The most basic protocol that everybody knows is email. So there were multiple different variations of email initially. There was like BBS forums, there was all these different communication layers, and the one that we kind of landed on to all globally agree upon was the email protocol, which is like SMTP. I forget, I used to know what something transfer protocol, mail transfer protocol, which effectively is like exactly the way that my computer processes email is the same way that your computer processes email. So when I create an email and I send it, you're able to receive it, understand it, and they're able to communicate, because there was like 15 different versions at the beginning. A protocol is a set of rules, almost most of the time open sourced, so that you know and you can interact with the protocol, and you and I can interact on a common layer, on a common communication, and then partake in an activity, whether it's sending an email, trading a token, lending and borrowing, using some leverage in CDP. Now my computer can communicate with your computer, and we know exactly the rules on how the rules of the world are going to be. And there's no question, if I hit that send button, is it going to send to you? Am I going to get wiped out or not wiped out? That's what a protocol inherently does. The reality of is like these protocols over time kind of had to turn into businesses. The things that were kind of immutable and completely immutable protocols aren't able to evolve. And so the first thing that we found about this was Bitcoin. In 2017, there was a proposal to increase the block space, reduce the time, and there wasn't a way to originally communicate on how to upgrade the Bitcoin protocol and the Bitcoin consensus layer. They've kind of solved that now, but these are problems that arise through the immutability, meaning not able to be changed. And the reality is like throughout business, if you want something to be interoperable and to evolve as business evolves and computer integration and networking and the world becomes globally on chain, you have to be able to evolve it faster. So protocols need to evolve, which is good and bad, has pros and cons, and inherently started DAOs. DAOs were the original decentralized autonomous organizations. DAO, how do you change and decide to evolve a protocol?
That's a lot. Yeah, that really clears up protocols for me. I didn't fully understand what those were. The way you broke that down, that really cleared that up for me. Beyond just trading coins, what is crypto's effect on the world, and why should we use it?
Well, trading is one of the primitives of commerce. right? It's one of the most basic economic derivatives of like all of humanity, right? So first off, the first economic primitive is store of value. So all of society and all of civilization started with having a granary. If you're hunting for food literally every single day and you're not able to store food or have a store of value, you have to basically spend most of your time figuring out how to forage and hunt that exact day. So crypto, first economic primitive, and the economic primitive of Bitcoin was there's only 21 million. This is a good store of value. We're like essentially rebuilding all the economic primitives that society and civilization has had since the granary wasn't invented in Egypt or Babylon or whatever where it was invented. So trading is a thing, right? So once you have a store of value, you have to have security to be able to protect it. You know, you have to have a military. And so right now there's a lot of secure stuff behind the scenes. So there's a whole entire nation state attacking the industry because if you're not able to protect your store of value, somebody's going to come and take it. So trading is a derivative that, you know, is commerce. And some of the beauty of trading is the more that you trade with somebody, the less likely you are to go to war with them. And so it's like, how do I trade with somebody in another country? How do we all agree on a protocol to trade together? Then you have lending, then you have borrowing, then you have perpetuals, then you have like savings accounts. Then like, how do you decide how to save interest? Economic flows. You don't want dead capital like sitting on a chain because that kind of like just takes up space. So there's like a lot of these other things that crypto is solving. But if you kind of go back to the very, very beginning, the initial thing that started society was store of value. And so that's why it was probably the first protocol and communication technique of narrative that kind of rang true with people. Previously, the only way to protect something is with armies and lead bullets. What crypto in general and cryptography, cryptocurrency brought to the table was the ability to protect your valuables with your brain, with cryptography. So now I can store a 12-word keyword phrase in my brain or 24 keyword phrase in my brain. If I know those 24 keywords, I have access to that wallet. I can cross any border, any barrier, any planet, anywhere I go to. If I have those 24 keywords, I now own that digital asset, those rights, those entitlements, those images, whatever it is. So we're resolving everything that economic primitive that originally happened through society from the very beginning to today. Let's call it like, 5,000, 6,000 years. We're refiguring out how to remake those from the ground up. And we're speedrunning that fast. Like we've gone through, if you take store value and you take trading, and you take options and derivatives, we've taken all the last 200 years of economic finance and we've sped run it in about 15 years, right? And we're learning a lot. It's moving fast.
Oh yeah, I really liked your comparison for like protecting what's yours, like protecting it with an army, but now you can protect it with your brain. You don't need a giant militia to keep you safe. I really like that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't think it's mine. I forget who said that, but it's a cool one.
So let's kind of go back to protocols a little bit.
Mhm.
We hear the terms layer 1 and layer 2 thrown around a bunch. What exactly do those mean? Why would a protocol need a layer 2?
So a layer 1 versus a layer 2 is buy from the manufacturer or do you buy from the retail outlet? Right. So when you go to the store, they don't do the farming. They don't, go to a grocery store. They don't make the packaging. They don't make the package. If you want to buy in bulk, it's the layer 1, but you have to buy more and it's going to be more expensive. Like you can't buy an edible piece or like a single item. Right. And so the concept of layer 1 or a layer 2 is that a lot of the large output heavy lifting would be like wholesale production, while the layer 2 is more localized in anything that you want to do, either be a token or a DeFi primitive. It's generally cheaper. It's very, at one point in time, gas on Ethereum was $1,200 a DeFi transaction, right? So if it's $1,200 a DeFi transaction, what that effectively means that if you're at $100,000, that's 1% of the gas cost. So you really could only transact in things that were $100,000 or more. Now Ethereum has brought the gas cost down, and so layer 2s are becoming less and less. The lines are a little bit blurring a little bit, but in that space, a layer 2's made 100% like sense. You can't have the gas costs go up to $2,000 a transaction if you're trading a $2,000 item. It just doesn't make any sense. So layer 2s are just effectively retail shops versus wholesale.
I like that. You got some really good analogies. What is a RWA and why is it so important to crypto?
RWAs are real world assets, right? So one of the things that I found in 2013 when I first got into cryptocurrency, we talked about bringing gold on chain. And the reason why we talked about bringing gold on chain was it was the most valued resource in the world globally. People culturally, historically store gold. Well, now you can store gold tokens on chain and have access to the price impact of gold. So gold goes up in price, gold goes down. But if you believe that gold is an asset that you want to hold, you now can hold that. So gold was like one of the first ones. Now we're seeing all the other securities in T-bills. What this effectively means is that historically, let's call it 12 years ago, I don't know what the rules are today, but 10 or 12 years ago, if you wanted to buy a US-based stock, you had to have $300,000 in a foreign trading account that would then give you access to the US-based stock market. You have to KYC, you have to KYB, because there are laws around who's able to own a US-based security. To be able to go through that process in Germany at the time, you would have to have a $300,000 in your trading account to be able to trade a US-based stock. $300,000 is not global access to the world's economy, right? And so effectively, RWAs unlock access to the entire world from their cell phone, the ability to buy and purchase SpaceX, Tesla, gold, all across the world for pennies and maybe 0.5% to 1% of slippage on the execution price. So what you're basically doing is you're unlocking, they still have to protect it with their brain, but they don't necessarily have to protect it because it's actually very expensive to store a bunch of gold and protect it, because you have to
Keeping
have
it safe too. You don't just got to store it.
Exactly. But if you want access to the price of gold and you believe in gold, buy the ounce, that's how it's generally sold. Now you can have that, buy the stock. And also historically, you would have to be able to purchase one whole stock, right? Robinhood kind of unlocked this as well. You don't have to buy a whole entire stock. So if you're a Nigerian goat farmer and you want to buy 1/10 of a SpaceX share, you can. And that might be your store of value that you believe in. And so you're opening up the entire world to this global economy, and you're giving access to everybody in the world. Everybody in the world has a cell phone now. Most people, majority of people in the world. So you're giving the majority of people in the world access at pennies on the dollar to in transaction costs to every asset that traditionally only an American citizen had access to.
A common theme that I'm noticing, crypto's like main goal is to lower the barrier of entry, and the more people that are able to get in, the bigger it's going to get too, is something I'm thinking.
100%. You nailed it. Access doesn't mean demand, right? You still have to solve both of those sides, but if it's something that has inherent demand, crypto will allow everybody in the world to access it and makes the pie inherently bigger. And it also happens the other way. I'm seeing deals now from Africa, from Brazil, I've never seen in my entire life or never would have access to. So that import-export business in Africa, Congolese mineral rights. There is a farming and cattle leverage in Brazil, like printing at a 28, 29% APR. So now you can invest in cattle in Brazil, and they have a capacity and they're looking for a couple $1 million, and now I can invest in that, where the cost of capital for them in their country is 50 to 60% APR. So now they get the cost of capital to graze and grow their cattle at a lower rate, and then I get access at a predominantly higher rate. And so the person who's doing the commerce wins. The cost of capital to borrow in America is inherently cheap because we're a high trust society and we have a lot of security. So now you have these different access both ways, right? Into deals into other countries and to deals into America. And we're all kind of playing this rate game.
It's really going to start to connect everything. Everything's going to start to connect more. What are smart contracts, and how do they work without needing a lawyer or a middleman?
A smart contract is a set of code that is Turing complete, meaning it executes from the beginning to the end, in which you and I can then transact globally from anywhere in the world. And we both can either trade something, lend something, borrow something, but it doesn't have to be that. We can have a contract for anything that we want. And when we write the code, we can enact certain rules that will not need a lawyer or any middleman between me and you. And we already know all the rules that we can pre-agree upon. And once we agree upon those rules, we can write that into a smart contract and then execute that smart contract. I bring my side of the table, you bring your side of the table, and then those payments, those generally tokens, it's usually something to do with a crypto coin or a crypto token, gets unlocked, an agreement, and therefore the contract executes either time-based, or when you deliver a piece of art, you deliver a piece of code, you deliver a task that you were assigned to do or I was assigned to do, then it unlocks like the next set of currencies. We don't need adjudication. We don't need to go to a lawyer. We don't need to go to a judge, because we already have written around all the rules on exactly what is going to happen. and when it's going to happen. And then we can time that and hold people accountable to that. So the cost of building a smart contract has the cost embedded of adjudication.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bryan, for taking these questions on today. I hope to see you again soon, and you have a great one.
Awesome. Thank you, Nic. Take care.